Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today we're looking at a story that really hits home about the human cost of war. I mean, the search for truth, for closure. It can literally span generations. Imagine waiting nearly 80 years for answers from someone lost in combat. That gap, between hoping and knowing, it's huge. And that's really the heart of our deep dive today. We're tracing the incredible story of Staff Sergeant Moses F. Tate. He was a young American airman, and his life, his loss, it's all tied up with one of World War II's most, well, daring, but also incredibly costly missions. This isn't just history class. It's about a family's long wait, a nation's promise to remember, and how science, even decades later, can finally bring some peace.
Exactly, and our goal here is to really unpack that. We'll look at Moses Tate's service record, the big picture of Operation Tidal Wave, the mission where he was lost, and then this almost 80-year effort to identify his remains. His story, it's like a lens, isn't it? It shows you the personal sacrifice, the grand strategy of war, and that long, long vigil families kept. It really highlights the deep ripple effects of these conflicts.
Right. And to piece this together, we've got a mix of sources. Official military records, which give us the timeline. Then there are these really poignant newspaper clippings from his family back home that capture the anxiety in a small Kansas town. And of course, historical accounts of the Plessy raid itself. So we're getting different angles, trying to build a full picture. Okay, so let's start at the beginning. Moses Tate, where did he come from? He was Moses Frank Tate, born May 22, 1920. Seneca, Nemaha County, Kansas. And like so many young men back then, June 24, 1940, he enlisted in the Army from Fort Leavenworth. The local paper said he joined Uncle Sam.
And that decision to serve, it wasn't in a vacuum for him. It was sort of a family tradition, which I think gives you some context for their later endurance, His dad, Charles A. Tate, he was a World War I vet, go back further. His great-grandfathers, William Huff and Sidney Haley, they fought in the Civil War.
Wow.
Yeah, and an uncle, Ed Palmer, was in the Spanish-American War. So this family understood service, understood sacrifice. It might have in some way prepared them for the long wait ahead. And his brother, Marvin, he also joined up U.S. Navy.
So Moses enlists in the Army, but he ends up in the air. How did that happen? His journey starts traditionally enough, Fort Riley, Camp Funston. But then, July 1941, he transfers to the Air Corps. This is just before Pearl Harbor, mind you. Then it's a whirlwind. Jefferson Barracks, bases down in Florida, Miami Beach, Panama City. That's where he went to a flexible gunnery school at Tyndall Field.
Ah, gunnery school. That was key.
Absolutely. He became an expert aerial gunner, got promoted to sergeant in November 42, and he earned those silver wings, which was a big deal then. More training followed Salt Lake City, near El Paso, Topeka, before he finally shipped overseas in June 1943.
And being an aerial gunner, I mean, that was a tough, vital job back then. The training was intense. They didn't just take anyone. They looked for skill, courage, and physical qualifications. It wasn't just shooting. It was about being calm under fire, anticipating enemy moves, literally blasting enemy planes out of the sky from a moving bomber. Immense pressure. Getting those silver wings meant you were elite, but it also meant you were heading right into the thick of it, constantly.
Which brings us to August 1st, 1943. Operation Tidal Wave. This is where Moses Tate's story meets this huge historical event. The mission hit 9 major oil refineries near Ploiești, Romania. These weren't just any refineries. They produced something like 30% of all Axis oil. Basically the fuel for Hitler's war machine. Crippling that supply was the goal. Tate's crew, their specific target was designated White Fave.
And Tidal Wave, it really stands out. It was incredibly daring, maybe even reckless, some might say. You had 177 B-24 Liberators flying this enormous 2,400-mile round trip from Libya.
That's a long way in a B-24.
A very long way. But the really radical part, the plan was for a low-altitude attack, flying in at just 200 to 800 feet.
Wow, that low.
Yeah, totally different from typical high-altitude bombing. They hope for surprise, better accuracy, but it put those huge bombers right in the crosshairs of ground defenses. It was a massive gamble.
And Ploiești wasn't exactly undefended, was it?
Oh, not at all. It was probably one of the most heavily defended targets outside Germany. They knew how important that oil was. We're talking hundreds of anti-aircraft guns, those deadly 88mm flat cannons.
Oh, nasty stuff.
Right. Plus smoke generators to hide targets, barrage balloons tethered to snag low-flying planes, and dozens of fighter aircraft ready to intercept. It was a hornet's nest.
So the mission goes ahead. What was the immediate result? The cost?
The cost was horrific, just brutal. Of the 177 bombers that took off, sources say 51, maybe 52 were shot down. Only 88 made it back to Benghazi, many riddled with holes.
And the airmen?
That's the worst part. 310 American airmen killed, another 108 captured as POWs, 78 interned in neutral Turkey. Think about this. More American airmen died on that single mission than Romanian civilians and military personnel combined. 310 versus 116. It shows you just how intense the danger was for those crews.
A terrible price.
Yeah.
So did it work? Did that sacrifice achieve the strategic goal? Well, the initial reports looked okay. Oil production dropped, maybe by 46% temporarily, from around 366,000 tons a month down to 140,000.
But the Germans and Romanians were incredibly efficient at repairs. Most refineries were back up and running pretty quickly, some at full capacity within months.
So the impact was short-lived.
Very short-lived. It raises that tough question, was the cost worth the temporary disruption? It definitely became a major point of debate, and it influenced later bombing strategies. Maybe taught them that one-off raids against resilient targets weren't the answer.
Right, a hard lesson learned.
All right.
Let's zero in on Moses Tate again. August 1st, 1943. He's on that mission. Staff Sergeant Tate was the tail gunner on a B-24, serial number 4240520. The plane's nickname was Yay-to-You. He was flying with Pilot First Lieutenant Edward T. McGuire and the rest of the crew, part of the fifth and final wave of bombers heading into that inferno.
There was a bit of confusion in one newspaper report, calling it a flying fortress. But it was definitely a B-24 Liberator, the Yen-2. And like so many others that day, the Yen-2 didn't make it. It was hit by flak during the approach to the target. Reports say some crew were killed right away. The plane crashed in flames near a place called Barcanesti, Romania. Of the 10 men on board, 7 were listed as MIA or KIA. That included Moses Tate.
But some survived.
Yes, remarkably. 3 gunners from the tail section managed to bail out before the crash. But for the others, including Moses, their fate was officially unknown. And that uncertainty, that's what hit the family back home.
Ah, the telegram. That must have been just awful. Mr. and Mrs. Charles A. Tate back in Seneca, Kansas. They get that message from the Adjutant General. Their son, Staff Sergeant Moses F. Tate, 23 years old, missing in action since August 1 in the Middle Eastern area. Just stark words, no details, just missing.
And that telegram, it started this incredibly long, agonizing wait for the Tate family. Months passed with no further news, nothing. His father, Charles, he held on to this hope, maybe denial, that Moses was captured, a German prisoner, alive, just unable to get word out.
Understandable.
Completely. Meanwhile, his brother Marvin was serving in the Navy, involved in the Sicily campaign. He didn't even know Moses was missing for some time. And Moses's wife, Eunice, and his sister Helen, they were working defense jobs in St. Louis. The whole family just suspended in this terrible uncertainty. It really shows that war's impact stretches far beyond the battlefield.
Amidst all that uncertainty, though, there were efforts to recognize the sacrifice, right? Letters, commendations. Yes, the family did receive official letters. Brigadier General V.H. Strom wrote to the parents, enclosing a statement from General Hap Arnold himself, head of the Army Air Forces. Arnold praised the heroic accomplishments and utter disregard for personal safety of the Plisty crews, specifically mentioning those who fell in the attack.
Powerful words.
And Brigadier General Eugene Ent wrote to Moses's wife, Eunice. He called her husband one of the great heroes of this war and confirmed that a recommendation for an award for Tate's actions was approved, trying to offer some comfort, some recognition.
And those awards materialized eventually. In December 1943, his parents went to Topeka to receive the Distinguished Flying Cross for him. Interestingly, our sources say that was awarded for his role in the first bombing of Rome, so he'd already shown bravery on prior missions.
Oh, okay.
Then later, in November 1944, more than a year after he went missing, they received the Purple Heart. So you see this timeline of recognition, first for valor, then acknowledging the ultimate sacrifice.
But even with medals, the uncertainty lingered until the War Department made it official.
Right.
That came in March 1944, 7 months after he was lost. Another letter, this one formally ending his MIA status. It declared a presumptive finding of death. They set the official date of death as August 2, 1944, 1 year and a day after the mission. It's a bureaucratic necessity, I suppose, but for the family, official closure without proof must have been incredibly hard.
Exactly. And even after that official word, our sources say his parents just couldn't fully let go. They felt he may be alive, but unable to let them know. And really captures that deep human struggle to accept loss without concrete evidence. That hope, however small, persists. It's something many families of MIAs have faced throughout history.
So the war ends. What happens to the remains of those lost at Plisty, like Moses Tate, the ones who weren't immediately identified? Well, initially, many were buried as unknowns. They were placed in the hero section of the civilian and military cemetery in Bolovan, near Plisty in Romania, just rows of graves marked unknown.
And that wasn't the end of their journey. After the war, the American Graves Registration Command, the AGRC, had this monumental task. They exhumed these unknowns from Romania. Over time, these remains were moved, eventually reinterred in American military cemeteries in Belgium Ardennes and Henri-Chapelle, but they were still unknowns, mixing with remains from other battles, other campaigns, making identification even harder down the line.
Okay, now jump way forward. Decades pass. We get into the 21st century, and science has advanced incredibly. This is where the Defense POW MIA Accounting Agency, the DPAA, comes in. Their whole mission is exactly this, accounting for missing personnel. In 2017, they began a focused effort. They started exhuming unknowns from those Belgian cemeteries, specifically believed to be associated with Operation Tidal Wave losses, bringing modern forensics to bear on these cold cases.
And the process is just incredibly detailed. They use everything available. Traditional methods like anthropological analysis, looking at bones and dental records. That's the baseline. But then they add modern techniques. Mitochondrial DNA testing, which can link remains to maternal relatives. Isotope analysis, which can give clues about where someone grew up based on elements in their bones and teeth.
Fascinating.
It really is. They combine all that scientific data with circumstantial evidence, historical records, crash site details, anything they can find to build a case, to link a set of remains to a specific individual. It's like assembling a puzzle with pieces scattered across 80 years.
And for Moses Tate, after all that time,
Yeah.
they finally found the match.
Yes.
July 12, 2022, nearly 79 years after he was lost over Romania. The DPAA officially announced they had identified the remains of Staff Sergeant Moses Frank Tate.
Just incredible. 79 years.
Think about that. The waiting finally over.
A truly profound moment. After the identification, his remains were brought back from Belgium, back home to Missouri. On October 27, 2022, Staff Sergeant Tate was finally laid to rest with full military honors at the Missouri Veterans Cemetery in Springfield. Home at last.
And there's that final symbolic act. For years, his name was on the walls of the missing at the Florence American Cemetery in Italy, just a name among thousands. Now, next to his name, there's a small bronze rosette. It signifies he's been accounted for, found, remembered.
It's such a powerful symbol. Moses Tate's story is more than just one airman. It really embodies the individual cost of huge events like Operation Tidal Wave, like World War II itself. His journey, enlistment, service, loss, the long wait, and finally identification. It highlights the deep impact of war and, crucially, that enduring commitment to bring every service member home no matter how long it takes.
And important to remember, he wasn't alone in that sacrifice at Ploesti. The numbers are staggering. Across all the raids on Ploesti, between April and August 1943, the 15th Air Force lost 270 bombers. Over 2,200 airmen were listed as missing from those raids alone. Just immense numbers.
These stories, like Moses Tate's, they matter because they remind us, don't they? They remind you of the real people, the real families, behind the strategic maps and casualty statistics. And they show the incredible perseverance, the scientists, the military, the families, all working towards bringing closure and honoring that promise to never forget. Even after the guns fall silent, the work of remembrance continues.
Moses Tate's story really does bridge that gap, doesn't it, between one act of heroism near 80 years ago and this long, determined search for truth. It really makes you think, how many other stories like his are still out there? Untold stories of courage, families still waiting, maybe needing just one more piece of evidence, one more scientific advance to finally bring closure.
It really does. It speaks volumes about perseverance, not just wartime bravery, but the quiet, decades-long dedication to memory, to honoring the fallen. It shows that commitment, that promise to remember, can truly span generations and overcome the passage of time.